Kara Swisher knows all the tech moguls. For the past 30 years, she's had a front row seat covering the industry and its leaders, from Bill Gates and Steve Jobs.
But what's the greatest misunderstanding between you and your relationship?
To Mark Zuckerberg.
This is a great moment in internet history.
And Elon Musk.
What's the mood of Elon today?
Swisher knew them before they changed the world. Now she's sharing everything in her new book, Burn Book, A Tech Love Story. I spoke to Kara Swisher about that access over the decades and the political response needed to rein in big tech. Kara Swisher, nice to see you again.
Good to see you.
This book really illustrates all these different big tech players and medium-sized tech players that you've known since the very beginning, and what you really think about these tech giants. Why did you want to share those stories with the public right now?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I would turn down a lot of books about like what happened at Yahoo, what happened at Google, what happened at Twitter, and I just wasn't interested in doing a longer version of a news story, which I had done for years and years before, a long time ago. I was a beat reporter, and then I turned into sort of a little mini media mogul by doing All Things D and Recode and doing my conferences. And I already had a lot of attitude doing those. Once I got out of the sort of Washington Post, Wall Street Journal place, I had my own place, and I did what I wanted. I decorated it the way I liked, which was a lot of personality and a lot of opinion, essentially, but also based on reporting. We always, at the very heart of everything we've done, is reporting, really good reporting and being accurate and coming to conclusions. And so one of the things is Walt Mossberg, who I was a longtime partner of mine through a lot of these entrepreneurial stuff, he didn't write his memoir. He was going to, he had a contract, and he decided against it. And I was like, someone has to say what these people were like. And there's like a very small handful of people who had constant access to them, especially at the beginning. And then also to say what happened to them, like very obvious figures like Elon Musk, but all of them. How did they develop? And then what damage did they do? And what good things did they do? There's a lot of positive stuff in this book, even though everyone's like, I strafed them. But it's a tech love story as well as a burn book. And by the way, burn books are accurate. They just burn. That's different.
Well, let's go through a couple of the big names of the people that you talk about. I want to talk about Mark Zuckerberg, who you call one of the most carelessly dangerous men in the history of technology, who didn't even know it. Explain to people why you think that he got to where he is, but he still doesn't really get the danger of what he has created or what he's doing.
Well, he doesn't want to take the blame for it. Every time you create something, at the heart of the book is a quote by Paul Virilio, which is, when you invent the ship, you invent the shipwreck. I'm wondering why we don't have any lighthouses yet. And I know why we don't, because these tech companies don't want to take any blame for the shipwreck part. They like the ship. They like the money it brings. But anytime there's any kind of disaster, they run for the hills. And so in Mark's case, and look, let me just separate. People like to make these people into villains or good people. Life is complex. He's actually a very nice person. That doesn't matter. What we should look at is what he's doing at the company. He's a rapacious information thief, as Walt Mossberg called him. They take your information and they do what they want with it. And they've not been very careful with it. And they've also been not very careful about the responsibility they bear, being one of the great distributors of information. Can you imagine if the New York Times or any paper platformed all these people who lie constantly? It would be a real problem. But then they say, we're not a media company. We're a platform. We're benign. They're not benign, and they have to stop lying about it.
I'll come back to Elon Musk, but I do want to bring up, there are countries trying to force him to take responsibility.
They are.
Australia,
Canada,
and they are still blocking news content. Meta is on all their platforms. I wonder what you think about those efforts, and whether Zuckerberg will ever sort of succumb to the pressure that he's feeling from countries.
I think the problem you have is that the U.S. hasn't regulated, and these are U.S. companies for the most part. And so you can do all you want. Europe can do all it wants, and I props to Canada, props to Margrethe Vestager at the EU, everybody else. But it doesn't matter. It's hardly it's a flesh wound at best for these companies. It's got to be done here in this country. Very serious privacy laws, antitrust laws, algorithmic transparency laws. It's just not happening here because our Congress is both dysfunctional, as you may have noticed, but also because they just, for some reason, decided that the world's most powerful companies shouldn't be regulated when they regulate everybody else.
Let's go back to Elon Musk, who you have or had a complicated relationship with. You say
Very
that he was the most disappointing man in tech. When did he start disappointing you? What changed for you?
He was always, look, none of these people are perfect. Everyone's like, oh, you didn't see he was bad. I'm like, he wasn't. He had issues around all kinds of things, just like they all did, by the way. Gender lawsuits, racial lawsuits. They all did, FYI. But that's not an excuse, of course. We wrote about them. I'm not sure what you want me to do in that regard, but I did think he had a great hope. When he was started to do electric cars, which you have to give him props for pushing that forward, I do. I don't like how he created his company, but fine. He did a lot with that, and he pushed it forward. He gets all credit for that. Yeah. Same thing with Starlink. When I saw Starlink, I was like, what a huge vision. That's important. Same thing with rockets, the stuff he was doing on rockets. And except he changed. Something happened over COVID, and you could start to see some crazy stuff happening. And that included, all this retweeting of anti-Semitic stuff. I don't care how much he denies it. He's pushing it. His flirtation with white supremacy has turned into a full-blown relationship. You know what I mean? It's really strange that he's doing this. His obsession with DEI, his victimization, the fact that his anti-government screeds, the man who took a loan from the federal government and who does business with the federal government, okay, then don't do business with them. When it suits him, he's fine. When it doesn't, he gets to. And then it's just, when you're the richest guy in the world, you have all these enablers around you that just lick you up and down all day. And I wasn't willing to lick him up and down in that regard. I'm not good at that.
No, that's a good thing, I think, too. One of the things that kind of strikes me through the book is that you are, you have access to all of these people, or have had access over time.
I have still a lot of them. So
that's my question. But now you've written a burn book where you write everything that you think about things. And yes, the subtitle's a tech love story. But are you worried that at some point people will start to say, hey, she's being too hard on us? We can't trust her. No, why not?
No, because the people who are deeply insecure, they can bug off. I don't care. They don't have to talk to me ever again. Most of the interviews I do, I think I'm never going to talk to them again. So that's how I conduct interviews. And so I've always done that. And smart people and adult people have always returned. Like, I've been hard on Tim Cook. He's an adult. He can take it. He's a successful guy. We talk about the products. You can have disagreements. And look, my whole Pivot podcast is about me disagreeing with a white guy, right? A very privileged, straight white guy.
Very smart white guy,
Smart white. We just argue. And I think adults are able to do that. And that's how our country used to work. We had disagreements, and then we figured out a compromise, and we moved on.
Let me end on this. While we wait for the United States to do something in terms of regulating this industry, are you sort of acting as a bit of a watchdog, just sort of putting up red flags for people? Because that's what it feels like a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, look over here. Like just today, it's so funny. My book is being, generative AI is making fake versions of my book all over Amazon, which is funny. There's a big story in the Washington Post today, but my wife looked at it and was like, there's all these Kara Swisher pictures that don't look like you. They're all AI. They're all Femi, by the way, which is my mother's thrill, but otherwise it's disgusting. And there's all these fake books that are being sold to consumers that aren't me. And it's taking away from my IP. And so I wrote the Amazon CEO. I'm like, hey, what up, dude? What are you doing here? Why aren't you protecting authors on this platform? And of course, they took the ones that were related to me down, but there's a dozen more up right now. So it's a big issue. This is something nobody anticipated, but it's like, what's going to happen if these malevolent players? So I'm sort of calling on that. I'm very interested in climate change tech. I'm very focused on healthcare. I'm doing a lot of interviews about where AI can help with healthcare. So I'm leaning into the positives so that they'll do the positive and pointing out the negatives. That's what and trying to mitigate them, because you can't, again, you invent the ship, you get the shipwreck. That's just the way it is. But let's get some lighthouses in place so that we have a better experience for all of us and protects everybody versus just a small group of incredibly wealthy and sheltered people.
Kara Swisher, I could talk to you for a long, long time, but I'll end it there.
I'll be in Toronto. I'm getting some Canadian Journalist Award, which I'm very excited to be Canadian.
That's wonderful.
Yeah,
okay,
I'm Canadian. Nice to meet you. I'm just a profile of Canadians. Here I am.
Thanks, Kara.
I like donuts. Okay, thank you.